The cards arrived on a Tuesday, 43 of them, handwritten, cream-coloured envelopes, a specific name on each one. Her ex-husband got one. His mother got one. The friend who had quietly stopped returning her calls sometime in the second year got one. The colleague who had leaned across a conference table with genuine concern in his voice and told her she might want to lower her expectations a little. He got one too. None of them were unkind. That was the part that seemed to unsettle people most. Inside each envelope was a single card. Simple design, no flourish, 3 sentences. The first thanked them. The second was specific, precise actually, about what she was thanking them for. The third said she hoped they were well. That was it. No update, no explanation, no subject line that said, "Look how far I've come." Renata sealed the last one at her kitchen table. A kitchen in a house she owned outright, in a city she had chosen entirely for herself. And then she made a cup of tea and sat with it for a while. She wasn't performing anything. That's the part I keep coming back to. She wasn't sending those cards to make a point. She was sending them because she genuinely, specifically meant every word. And to understand why, you have to go back 5 years, to the year that was supposed to break her. Renata had built a life that looked, from the outside, like something close to working. She was 41 years old, 15 years into a career in brand strategy. Not a career she had fallen into, but one she had constructed deliberately, one careful decision at a time. She was good at it. Not in the way people say to be encouraging, measurably, demonstrably good. The kind of good that gets noticed without requiring you to announce yourself in every room. Her husband, Marcus, was in finance. They had been together 9 years, married for 6. They had a dog they'd named after a film neither of them could fully remember watching. They had a shared digital calendar, 2 sets of friends that had mostly merged into one easy social mass. And the particular brand of companionship that forms between 2 busy people who love each other. Or at least believe they do, without always carving out the time to check. From the outside, it looked stable. For a while, it was. But there is a version of stability that is really just 2 people moving fast enough that they haven't noticed what's been slowly eroding beneath them. Renata noticed it before Marcus did. She'll say that plainly now. Small things at first. The way he had started referring to her job as her thing at dinner parties. A slight flattening in the phrasing she couldn't quite name. The way their conversations had migrated from future planning to pure logistics. Mortgage schedules, grocery runs, who had the dog on Saturday. The way he seemed fractionally more interested in his phone whenever she talked about work. Not rudely, not enough to call out, just a degree or 2 of distance that kept showing up in the same direction. She filed it away, the way capable people sometimes do, under, "I'll look at that when things slow down." Things didn't slow down. They accelerated. In January of the year that changed everything, Marcus sat across from her at the kitchen table, the one they'd found at a flea market and refinished together. One slow weekend that now felt like it belonged to entirely different people, and told her he wasn't sure he was still in love with her. Not harshly. Marcus was never harsh. He said it the way someone announces a change in the forecast. Measured, already a little removed. He said he'd been feeling it for a while and hadn't known how to bring it up. Renata asked him what he wanted to do. He said he thought they should probably separate. She didn't cry in front of him. She's never been fully sure whether that was strength or shock, or just the particular stillness that arrives when something you half knew becomes something you can no longer unknow. They were careful with each other, adult, measured, the way two people who are not fundamentally cruel can be even while they are hurting each other enormously. They agreed on a timeline. They agreed to sell the house. What she hadn't fully calculated, what there had been no clean way to see from inside the life they'd built together, was how much of her financial foundation was load-bearing on his. The house sold, the split was fair on paper. But by March, Renata was staring at a number in her bank account that did not match the life she had believed she was living. And that was only the first thing. There were two more coming, and she didn't know about either of them yet. The first thing, the thing she'd already started to feel the shape of before Marcus had even finished his sentence that January evening, was the money. Not because Marcus had done anything dishonest. That's a clarification Renata will make herself if you ask her. He hadn't hidden anything, hadn't been deceptive in any legal sense. It was more that they had built their financial life the way a lot of couples build things, together, gradually, with the implicit assumption that the together part was permanent. They had a joint investment account, not enormous but meaningful, the kind of thing you accumulate slowly and quietly think of as future money, retirement-shaped, rainy day-shaped. The split was even, as agreed. But even, right down the middle, meant that what Renata walked away with was roughly half of what she had believed represented security. Then there were the legal costs, mediation, conveyancing on the house, the smaller administrative fees that appear nowhere in the mental model of divorce but show up insistently on invoices. Real estate agent commissions, moving expenses. By the time the dust fully settled, Renata had significantly less than half of what she thought she had. Not because anyone had taken it, just because the life she had been living had cost more than she had been paying close attention to. She sat with the numbers for a few evenings, did the math several times. The math kept being the same. Then, in April, 11 weeks after Marcus's announcement, her company restructured. Her role wasn't eliminated exactly. It was absorbed, redefined in a way that would have required her to report to someone she had previously managed, on accounts she had spent 3 years consciously moving away from. HR delivered it in the careful language of strategic realignment. Her director, a man she had genuinely respected until that afternoon, told her she was valued, that this was simply about the direction of the business. She thanked him, asked for 2 weeks to consider the new terms. She spent those 2 weeks doing the math again. Then she resigned. It was the right decision. She knows that clearly now, and she knew it then. But knowing something is the right decision does not stop it from feeling like falling. Those two things can exist in the same moment. They often do. By June, Renata was in a rented apartment she had found quickly and without her usual research. Second floor of a building in a part of the city she didn't know well. Temporary furniture. Boxes she hadn't fully unpacked because unpacking felt like admitting something. She had her dog. She had her laptop. She had a savings account that told an entirely different story than the one she had believed she was living. 3 things in 5 months. And the people around her, the ones who loved her, didn't know what to do with any of it. Her friend Priya had called every week through January and February. By March, the calls had shifted to texts. By April, the texts were shorter. By May, Renata noticed she was always the one initiating. She stopped initiating. The silence that followed was not hostile. It was just the specific silence of someone who doesn't know how to be present for a kind of pain that frightens them. Renata understood it. She still felt it. Her mother was practical, the way frightened people sometimes are, full of suggestions, budgeting apps, the names of financial advisors, gentle urgings to come home for a while. Her brother called once, said everything right, then got busy with his own life the way that brothers do. And the colleague, the one who had always been slightly more interested in her proximity to the projects than in her, met her for coffee and told her, with genuine concern arranged carefully on his face, that she might want to lower her expectations a little. Recalibrate was the exact word he chose. As though the problem was that she had thought too highly of herself. She finished her coffee, said she'd think about it. She thought about it for approximately 48 hours. Then she stopped entirely. Because here is the thing about Renata, the thing the people around her kept almost seeing and then consistently missing. She was not, at any point in those 5 months, actually broken. She was recalibrating, and not in the direction anyone around her seemed to be expecting. She had lost the house, the savings, the marriage, the job. She had watched the people who loved her quietly reduce their expectations on her behalf, lower the ceiling, soften the floor, prepare themselves to catch someone who was falling. And somewhere inside all of that, something in her went very still. Not desperate, not angry, just decided. What she decided, and what she did first, that's where this story actually begins. The decision wasn't dramatic. That's the first thing worth understanding about how Renata operates. She does not do drama. She does precision. She spent the last 2 weeks of June sitting with a notebook, actual paper, actual pen, which she hadn't used for anything serious in years, and writing down everything she knew how to do. Not in the abstract, specifically. The exact skills, the exact clients she had impressed, the exact problems she had solved that other people in her field routinely struggled with. She filled 11 pages. Then she wrote down everything she wanted. Not what seemed reasonable given the current circumstances, what she actually wanted. The kind of list you write when you have stopped performing reasonableness for an audience. She wanted to work for herself. She wanted to own something that could not be split down the middle. She wanted to live somewhere she had chosen, not somewhere she had landed by default or by compromise. And she wrote this last and underlined it once. She wanted to stop explaining herself to people who had already decided what she was capable of. She looked at both lists for a long time. Then she closed the notebook and started making calls. She didn't announce anything. There was no post, no coffee meeting where she told people she was going out on her own, no pivot email to her network. She simply began. The first client was a former contact, a small company whose brand positioning had been quietly underperforming for 2 years. She reached out directly, no intermediary, and proposed a 3-month engagement at a rate that was fair to both of them. They said yes within 4 days. The second client came through the first, the third through the second. By September, 3 months after the notebook, she had 4 active clients, a clear rate card, and a business registered entirely in her name. Her name. Only her name. She was working from the temporary apartment at a fold-out table she'd found for $60 with the dog asleep under her chair. She was earning less than she had at the agency. She knew that was temporary. She also knew, in the particular way you know things when you have stripped everything back to what is actually true, that she was building something with a completely different structural integrity than anything she had built before. Something that belonged to no one else. The people around her noticed something had shifted, but couldn't locate exactly what it was. Priya sent a message in August, the first real one in months, asking how she was holding up. Renata replied warmly, said things were coming together. Priya said she was glad and that they should catch up soon. Renata said yes, absolutely. Neither of them set a date. It wasn't coldness. It was just that Renata had stopped organising her energy around people who organised their concern around whether she was surviving. Her mother called and asked if she was eating properly. Renata said yes and meant it. Her mother said she seemed different. Renata said she was probably just tired. Her mother didn't push. The colleague, the one with the recalibration advice, sent a LinkedIn message in October to say he'd heard she'd gone independent and that he thought that was very brave. Very brave. The precise word choice of someone who means very risky and is quietly waiting to be proven right. Renata liked the message, did not reply. By November, something started happening that she hadn't fully anticipated. Not because she hadn't worked for it, but because the compound effect of 5 months of quiet, deliberate effort is difficult to calculate in advance. Her clients started talking to each other. Not about her exactly, about the results. One of them referred her to a contact outside her usual industry. She took the meeting, adjusted her approach, landed the project. The work she was producing was, and she will say this without false modesty because she spent 15 years earning the right to say it, genuinely exceptional. She wasn't building a freelance stopgap. She was building a firm. She just hadn't told anyone that yet. And that was strategic. Because there is a specific window, the window before people who doubted you realize they've miscalculated, where you can build without interference, without the noise of revised expectations, without the particular friction of people updating their mental image of you in real time, asking questions you don't owe them answers to yet. Renata understood that window. She had decided back in June at her fold-out table to use every inch of it. By the end of that first year, she had 7 clients, a waiting list, and a business that had turned its first real profit. Nobody who had told her to lower her expectations knew any of that. She hadn't told them. And she wasn't planning to. Not because she was hiding, because she was still building. And the building, that part was only ever for her. But the window was about to close. Because things at that scale do not stay quiet forever. The window closed on a Thursday morning in March, 2 years and 3 months after Marcus had sat across from her at the flea market table and changed everything. A trade publication ran a profile on her, not a major feature, a mid-length piece in an industry newsletter that landed in roughly 40,000 inboxes. The headline called her one of the most interesting independent strategists working in her space. There was a photo, a quote about what had driven her to build something entirely on her own terms. She hadn't sought it out. A journalist had found her through one of her clients, asked for 30 minutes, and she'd given them 45 because the questions were actually good. She had not mentioned Marcus. She had not mentioned the apartment with the temporary furniture. She had not mentioned any of the things that had preceded the building, because none of that was the story she was telling. The story she was telling was the work. The newsletter landed at 8:47 in the morning. By noon, she had 14 new inquiry emails. The responses from her old world arrived in a particular order that she found later very clarifying. Priya was first. A voice note, which was more effort than a text, Renata noted, and she noted it without judgment. Priya said she'd seen the piece and that she wasn't surprised, that she had always known Renata was going to do something like this, that she was so proud and they absolutely had to get together properly this time. Renata listened to it twice. Then she replied warmly, because Priya was not a bad person. Priya was a person who found it easier to show up for success than for struggle. That is a very common kind of person. It is worth understanding rather than resenting. She suggested a date. They had lunch. It was genuinely nice. Renata went in with clear eyes and came out feeling uncomplicated about it. Some friendships reconfigure over time. That one had. That was allowed. Her brother called that same afternoon, the longest conversation they'd had in 2 years. He asked real questions about the business. She answered them. It was good. Her mother sent a screenshot of the article to what Renata could only assume was every person she had ever met, accompanied by a message that said simply, "This is my daughter." The colleague took slightly longer. He forwarded the piece to a shared professional group, a network of people from her agency days, with a comment attached. The comment said, "Great to see this. Always knew she had it in her." Always knew. Renata saw the forward because 3 people sent it to her directly. She read his comment once. Then she filed it under the same category as the LinkedIn message. The category labelled, "People who are not bad, just very interested in being retroactively correct." She did not respond to him directly. She did, however, accept 2 of the new inquiries that came through that same network. His name was attached to neither of them. Marcus heard about it through his sister, who had seen the article through a mutual contact. His sister, who had always been quietly kind to Renata, even through the months after the separation, sent a short message. It said, "I saw the piece. You look genuinely happy. I'm glad." Nothing more than that. Renata sat with that one for a while. It was the message that required the most from her. Not because it was difficult, but because it was genuinely kind. And genuine kindness, arriving from a complicated direction, takes a moment to receive properly. She replied, "Thank you. I am." She meant both words equally. By the end of that second year, the firm had 9 full clients, 2 long-term retainer contracts, and 1 project she was quietly most proud of. A complete brand rebuild for a company that had been operating well below its actual quality for over a decade. The work was specific and careful and lasting. The kind that doesn't always get traced back to its origin, but stays working long after the engagement ends. She hired her first employee in October, a second in December. She moved into an office, small, real, a building with a coffee shop on the ground floor and a view she had specifically chosen. And she sat in it on the first morning and let it be exactly what it was. Not a comeback. She had never framed any of this as a comeback, because a comeback implies defeat, and she had never been entirely convinced that defeat was what had happened to her. She had been stripped back. That was different. Stripping back reveals structure, and her structure, it turned out, had been sound the entire time. But there was one thing left. One thing she had been thinking about quietly for several months, the way she thought about most important things, and it was almost time. She had a list. 43 names, 43 cream-coloured envelopes, and she had finally figured out exactly what she needed to say. She bought the cards on a Saturday, plain, cream-coloured, the kind you find in independent stationery shops that smell like paper and quiet. She bought 45 and used 43, which is the kind of detail that tells you something about how carefully she had thought about this. She didn't write them all in one sitting. She wrote them over 3 evenings, unhurried, at the kitchen table, with the dog at her feet and no music on. She wanted the quiet. She wanted to be deliberate about every word. Each card had 3 sentences. The first thanked them. The second was specific, precise, about what exactly she was thanking them for. The third said she hoped they were well. And here is the thing I need to make sure you understand, because this is the part people most often get wrong when they hear this story. The gratitude was real. Not performed, not strategic, not the particular brand of thank you that is actually a slow burn in a cream envelope. Real, examined, arrived at gratitude. The kind that is only possible when you have gone far enough past something to finally see it clearly. Let me give you a few of the cards. Not all of them, just enough to understand what she was actually saying. Marcus's card said, "Thank you for the honesty, even when it arrived badly. What I thought I was losing turned out to be the weight I needed to put down to find out what I could actually carry. I hope you're well." She meant every word. Not because what happened hadn't hurt. It had, in the particular way that quiet endings hurt, the kind that don't hand you anything clean to be angry at. But she had spent 5 years building something that could not have existed inside the life she and Marcus had been living together. She understood that now, with the kind of clarity that only comes from the other side. Priya's card said, "Thank you for the years, and for the space when things got hard. I used both well. I hope you're well." No sting in it. She had genuinely used the space. The colleague's card took her the longest to write. Not because she was angrier at him than at anyone else, but because his particular gift to her was the subtlest one. She sat with his card for most of the second evening. What he had given her, she could see it completely now, was a very precise picture of the ceiling other people were prepared to imagine for her. And that picture had been extraordinarily useful. Because the moment you know the exact height of someone else's ceiling, you understand clearly how far above it you are building. His card said, "Thank you for the advice to recalibrate. It clarified something important for me about direction. I hope you're well." Every word accurate. Every word chosen. She wrote Marcus's mother's card. She wrote the card for the director who had delivered the restructure news with careful corporate language and genuine discomfort. She wrote the card for the mutual friend who had quietly stopped including her in things after the separation. Not cruelly, just with the social arithmetic of someone who had decided she now belonged to Marcus's column. She wrote a card for the woman at the letting agency who had been slightly dismissive the afternoon Renata had come in, still visibly raw, to sign the lease on the temporary apartment. She had remembered her name. She looked her up. She sent the card to the agency address. Because that woman had shown her, in one brief interaction, exactly how she did not want to be seen ever again. And that had been fuel. Every single person on the list had given her something. That was the truth she had arrived at. Not quickly, not easily, but completely and without performance. She sealed the last envelope on a Tuesday evening. The dog was asleep under her chair. The kitchen in the house she owned outright, the house she had chosen, in a city she had chosen, built around a life with no one else's name on the foundation, was warm and quiet. She made a cup of tea, sat with it for a while. Not triumphant, not relieved, just complete. She had not sent the cards to make a point. She had not sent them to be seen sending them. She had sent them because the gratitude was true, and because she believed, quietly, thoroughly, in the way she believed most things, that the people who had shaped her path deserved to know they had been part of it, even the ones who would misread the cards entirely. And some of them did. The colleague forwarded his to the professional group with a note calling her a class act. Priya called, tearful, wanting to talk properly. Marcus's sister sent a single small white flower emoji, which Renata saved without entirely knowing why. Marcus himself did not reply. She hadn't expected him to. She hadn't written his card for a reply. That's the difference between sending something to be answered and sending something because it is simply, quietly, true. That here's the part of this story I keep turning over. The part I think is actually the whole point, and it has nothing to do with the cards. The whole point, the thing that has been sitting underneath every part of this story, is not about what Renata built. It's about what she chose not to carry forward. Most people, when they go through what Renata went through, the marriage, the home, the savings, the job, all of it inside 12 months, most people make the loss the story. Not consciously, not as a deliberate choice. It just becomes the lens. The thing that happened becomes the thing that defines what comes after. It becomes the explanation for why certain things are harder now, why trust is difficult, why the ambition got a little quieter than it used to be. Renata didn't do that. She took the loss as information. She used it the way a structural engineer uses a stress test, not to confirm that something failed, but to locate exactly where the load-bearing walls actually were. And then she built from there. Precisely, deliberately, without drama and without an audience. That's not resilience in the motivational poster sense. That's something more specific than that. That's a woman who decided very early in the process that the pain was going to be useful, or it wasn't going to be anything at all. We call stories like this comeback stories. I've heard this one described that way more than once, and I understand the impulse. It maps onto a shape we recognize. She was down, now she isn't. Comeback. But Renata would push back on that framing. Gently, the way she does most things, but clearly. A comeback implies defeat. And she was never, at any point in those 5 months, convinced that defeat was what had happened to her. She was stripped back. She was clarified. Those are different things. Defeat leaves you smaller. Clarification leaves you with a more accurate picture of your actual size. She had spent 9 years inside a life that was, in many important ways, somebody else's blueprint. A shared calendar, a merged social world, financial architecture that assumed the partnership was permanent and load-bearing. When it came apart, she discovered, with more relief than she had expected, that the person underneath all of it was entirely intact. She hadn't lost herself inside the marriage. She had just set herself down for a while. And when everything else was removed, there she was. Still there. Waiting, apparently, to get back to work. If you're new here and this is the first story you found, welcome. This is Wettedy. We slow the footage down. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The thank you cards were not revenge with good manners. I want to be very clear about that. Because that reading flattens the story into something far less interesting than what it actually is. They were receipts. Not in the petty sense, in the accounting sense. Renata had done the full ledger. On herself, on her choices, on every person who had played a role in the year that stripped her back. And she had come out of it with a balance sheet that said, "I am fine. I am more than fine. And I have no one to be angry at, because every single thing that happened to me led directly to the life I am living now."
That is a rare thing to be able to say, and it is earned. Not given, not stumbled into, not arrived at by accident. Earned slowly, at a fold-out table, over 11 pages of a notebook, over 3 years of deliberate and unannounced work. The cards were the closing entry in the ledger, the line at the bottom that says, "Account settled." Not because anyone owed her anything, but because she no longer owed the story any more of her energy. She sent the cards, and then she was done. Done carrying it, done reviewing it, done letting it take up space in the room with her. That is not a small thing. That is, I would argue, the whole thing. I think about the version of Renata who might have told this story differently, the version who made the pain the headline, who led with what she lost, who stayed in that chapter because it was the chapter people were most willing to sit with her inside. That version is understandable. That version is deeply human. But that version never gets to sit at her own kitchen table, in her own house, sealing the last cream-coloured envelope and then making a cup of tea in the quiet. That version never gets to mean it. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment. Tell me what part of it landed. I read every single one, and more often than not, the comments become the next story. There is another one waiting whenever you're ready. It'll be right there. People always show you who they are. Wettedy just slows it down.